الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So Alhamdulillah, this time last year we had our open day. It was the 30th of July, I think. So just a few days, it was this similar weekend last year that we had the initial open day. And Alhamdulillah, since then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been very generous, very graceful to us. That after completing this year and preparing for the next year, we've had in the first year, I'd just like to mention two things before we start speaking about the courses. In terms of what we've had during the year, we've had, alhamdulillah, about 60 very good students. These 60 students, they were both people who are on site and people who are online. And we were blessed with the visit of Mufti Salman Mansoorpuri, who came and did the first inaugural lesson of Ashbah wa Nadair for the Iftar class. So that was, mashallah, great honor for us to have that. Then over the course of the year we've had several visitors, mashallah. And while we haven't done too much promotion, we haven't had time, because to be honest we've just been focused on the courses, delivering the courses. We haven't had time to do any major kind of promotion or anything like that. But alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with the visit of Mufti Taqi Sahab. So his course on Usulul Iftar, it was a very short course on Usulul Iftar, primarily targeted at the main scholars of the country. And because of the blessing of that, we had people like Mufti Shabbir Sahab and Mufti Abdus-Samad and numerous other muftis from around the country. In fact, what many people remarked is that it would have been very difficult to have gotten all of those names, Mufti Sacha and all these, from the various different madaris, to have come together under one roof. It would have been very difficult to have done that. Not that they've got anything against each other, it's just that to get so many people who are so busy running their own institutions and leading, to have come together like that. So alhamdulillah, we were honored to be able to host that here as well. Then we've had a visit from Prince Ghazi of Jordan, and he donated approximately 200 titles, about 200 titles to our library, mashallah. Our library is primarily focused on fiqh and aqidah books right now because of lack of space. Then alhamdulillah, we had Mufti Sarfraz from the Birmingham Fiqh Council come and give a lecture to the Iftar and jurisprudence students on, I believe it was food and medical masail. Those are the two subjects he covered. And then we had Mufti Ashfaq, who's one of the muftis from the Jamia Masjid of Bombay, come along and give a very in-depth, very wonderful seminar on the whole concept of giving fatwa and how to divide the various different levels of that and the processes in that. So alhamdulillah, there's been numerous other visitors as well, but these are I just want to suffice with this. The whole point, what are we trying to do different? What we're trying to do different here is something quite simple. What we want to do is we just want to try to take those alims and alimas, those people who consider themselves to be Muslim scholars, and we have between, I would say, about probably 700 to 1,000 probably around London, just around the Greater London area, which is huge, mashallah. So all we want is that we just want to equip them with the ability to research for themselves, right? So we just want to make them feel very confident that when they're faced with some kind of a question, whether it's their own question or whether it's a question that somebody asks them in the position of being an imam, position of being a chaplain, position of being maybe even a school teacher or a madrasa teacher or a maktab teacher, or just the local alim, because you may be the first and only graduate, maybe the only alim and alima in your area. And if that's the case, if you're in one of those areas, I know we're spoilt for choice in our local areas here, but if you're in one of those other areas, then the benefit would be that, or the challenge for you would be, is that everybody would consult you and you would have to be the allama of the area, because they say you went and studied for 6 years, right? And they probably had nothing to do with it, but they would probably say that we sent you to madrasa, right? As though they've got something to do with it, and they'll say that you can't answer our questions. So I think one of the biggest problems that we're seeing among people who have studied is that they just don't feel confident. So we're trying to remedy that. That's really the main thing, so that you can research, you'll be able to know where to find the material. And there's no alim in the world. There's no alim in the world. We know that from the story of Musa alayhi salam. But what it means to be equipped is you know where to look at the right time. That's the most important thing. Because nobody can know everything, right? Anybody who claims to know everything, that'd be quite a major challenge, because ilm is endless. So the idea is that we try to give the tools to do the research. If it's a fiqh question, which books to consult, which authorities to consult, the various different differences between those authorities, who to contact. And then I think what's very important is to try in all of that, whether that be in Iftar or theology or the jurisprudence that we've been dealing with so far, and then inshallah next year when we deal with tafseer, is to understand what are the current trends and the current day challenges in all of those subjects. So what is going on when it comes to Iftar, and what are the challenges to the whole fiqh discussion? Whether that be the fitna that's created, aspects of fiqh, aspects of jurisprudence, aspects of tafseer that are being challenged. For example, recently we saw a challenge about the authenticity of Sahih al-Bukhari, right? So if Sahih al-Bukhari can be challenged, I mean, then there's people who've challenged the Quran. Orientalists have been doing that for centuries. We need to be able to respond to that. Now, you may not have all of the answers in your mind, but if you can know where to look for them, that's very important. If you can know where to look for that's really the main thing. No alim can expect to know everything, but when the time arises, if you're a chaplain, you're a school teacher, you're a madrasa teacher, or an imam, you know where to go and look, or you know who to consult. That I think is very, because I mean, if you get asked a question and you have no idea where to look, and you're supposed to know it, and you're supposed to know where to find it, and you just don't know where even to start, that's really a feeling of great helplessness, and that psychologically is very damaging. That's basically what we're trying to do here, to provide that kind of thing. Because I mean, people have studied various different madrasas, and sometimes some of us haven't worked as hard as we should have or could have. We didn't really realize how we should have been learning. So then when we go out into the real world, and then the questions start coming, then it gets difficult. Like, I may have focused too much on my nahwa, on my grammar, but when I go out, I'm getting hadith questions, and I probably didn't focus too much on hadith, whereas I should have. So there could be many, many reasons for this, right? So at the end of the day, mashallah, the point is that it's never too late, right? However old somebody is, they can always learn. So what I'm going to do now is we're just going to go through the various courses and just give you an update about those courses, right? Because most of you would have already know about the courses that were already run, and we're just going to deal with those courses first. So first, if we start off with the Iftar course, alhamdulillah, I would say that the Iftar students, as some of you are here, how many questions on average would you say you've done during the year? So it's about 650 questions, which is an immense amount of questions. That averages probably about 4 to 5 questions a day, I would say, right? Because although we were doing more, but then in the beginning we may have been doing less than that. So probably about 4 to 6 questions a day to be. That requires a lot of research. And in Iftar, I think you can read lots of books, but what I've seen that's beneficial is that you actually practice the questions, because that as a mufti is what you're going to be doing outside. Yeah, you may be then told to go and teach hidayah generally it's the muftis that are given hidayah to teach in a madrasa, right? Generally speaking, especially hidayah thalith or whatever the case is. So that's just a side aspect of it, to be honest, I think. Right? Because the reason why they're probably given hidayah and so on is probably because they've developed a keen juridical insight, how to break things down in a juridical manner. Because when you have a case, the best way to figure out how to answer it is to break it down into its juridical components that are related to jurisprudence, and then to legislate and try to understand the hukm of each one. Otherwise, if you look at it in a wholesome manner, as a whole, in a monolithic way, then you could have a wrong response. So sometimes there's only one small issue that's critical in that. So aside from that, really what you're going to be doing outside is people are going to be constantly coming to you, emailing you, calling you and saying, what's the answer to this, what's the answer to that? And they want answers. So obviously in 1 year, even if you've done 1,000 questions, it's not enough. And even if you do 2,000 questions in 2 years, it's not enough, because that won't cover all the questions that you will be asked outside. But it will give you a good understanding of how to deal with those questions and how to go and research it. And if you've done about 1,500 to 2,000 questions in 2 years, then inshallah you will, especially when we're doing most of the common questions, by the time you finish, you would basically be able to deal with at least half of the questions directly, immediately, because those would have been covered, and then the rest of them, right? So alhamdulillah, that's the iftar. So basically, just for next year, what we're doing is the first year we covered a book on usul al-fiqh. We covered part of the al-ashbah wal-nadha'ir on the qawa'id al-fiqh. We covered a book on usul al-fiqh, Masar al-wusul ila ilm al-usul, which I thought was very good for even understanding contemporary themes in jurisprudence, and that was actually done by the jurisprudence people as well. Along with that, we've done our usul al-iftar and the sharh uqud rasm al-mufti, etc. Next year, inshallah, we're just going to focus on more advanced books and earlier books on usul al-fiqh, on usul al-iftar. So we're going to try to understand usul al-iftar from a Shafi'i perspective, from a Maliki perspective, just to give us an understanding, because we are living amongst other madhahib. We're not in a just homogeneous madhab environment. Living in London or any other city, primarily, I mean, you're dealing with many madhabs around you, right? So it's important to know that. And I would say that there's probably not going to be many difference in the adab of iftar among them anyway. And then the later usul, the earlier usul books, where the usul is generally taken from the usul of Bazdawi and Sarakhsi and those. So we're going to be looking at that. And then we're also, inshallah, going to be looking at some of the more modern approaches to fiqh, minority fiqh, right? Sina'atul fatawa in contemporary times, basically formulating fatwa in contemporary times and the contemporary challenges. Whether we agree with something or not, that's we don't want to dismiss things just because we don't like the person who said it, or they may not be from our manhaj, or whatever the case is. We want to actually be able to go through that and critically assess these things and find what's useful. And then if we disagree with something, well, we disagree with it, but at least we can take the useful. And it's very important for muftis to be ahead of that challenge. And that's why those things, inshallah, will be covered along with a specialization. So this is the year of specialization, because this is the students will be entering the second year. So it's the time of specialization where we've got the 8 areas in which they'll be picking at least one of those areas and then thoroughly, inshallah, working on that and providing a thesis, producing a thesis on that. But what we do have is that initially we thought that we're only going to run the iftar course every 2 years. So let it run its full 2-year course and then start a new batch. But we're trialing something this year which may come as good news for some of you, because many of you have contacted us during the year that they want to join the iftar class in the coming year from September. And we were just saying to everybody, no, there's going to be no iftar course until 2019, which is next year. But we've decided that we may be able to trial this and make this work. So we're trying to look for some really outstanding students who feel that they've got the capability to join the Iftar class in their second year, right? Meaning the current Iftar course is second year, and we'll give them some preliminary material to help them, because I don't think it should be too difficult for those who are quite motivated and quite academically adept, inshallah, so that they can do the second year as their first year, as the first year of their course, and then they can do the second year, which will be the first year material again the year afterwards. So inshallah, I'm hoping that works. We've at least got 2 students, inshallah, for that, but we can probably take 1 or 2 more maybe, right? So if you're interested, then this is probably the time to put your application in for that, inshallah. If we move on to the jurisprudence course, I'm going to invite Maulana Zishan, who's been one of our jurisprudence teachers, to give us a kind of an overall understanding of his interaction with the students, because he was one of the main teachers of the jurisprudence course as well. But just to give you a quick roundup from my side, maybe we had slightly overpromised on the lubab last year. We expected that we may be able to cover the whole of lubab. Even covering the whole of Quduri is difficult in a madrasa, and we were there trying to be extremely ambitious of trying to cover the commentary of Quduri al-Lubab in 1 year. And that obviously didn't happen, but it wasn't because the teachers didn't work hard. The teachers were working very hard to try to complete it, but it just wasn't physically possible to do so in the time that we had. Even if we had missed out to ibadat. What we actually discovered is that there are numerous students that came in, and some of them had not even gone beyond, few had not even gone beyond ibadat in some cases. It was the first time that they were actually dealing with nikah and buyu and hudud, etc. That they'd never gone beyond the ibadat section. Some had done ibadat and a bit of nikah and talaq, but hardly any of buyu. So it was, I'm sure the students will probably agree that it was definitely very beneficial, because it was done in a very critical way, very contemporary way, to try to understand the contemporary masail as you're reading Kitab al-Nikah and as you're reading Kitab al-Buyu. So alhamdulillah, we did the whole of Kitab al-Buyu. We covered the ibadat again, some in brief and some in detail, and we also covered Kitab al-Nikah, talaq, etc., and several other chapters as well. I'm going to let Maulana Zishan talk about the other aspect of this. So what we now have for next year is that we're going to be running that course again. But now, inshallah, we can most likely let you know exactly how much we think we can cover this year, because we've had an experience now of 1 year. So we can actually tell you that we're not going to cover the whole of Lubab, but these are the chapters that we will cover, inshallah. So at least we can do that. That's what we understand from there, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahnu nusalli wa nusallim ala rasulih al-kareem, amma ba'd. So just to talk about what our aims and objectives were in this advanced jurisprudence course. Mufti Sahib's already highlighted most of what I was going to say anyway. So the idea of Whitethread was it's a postgrad, or it's focusing upon postgraduate students. Initially we thought of doing a refresher course, which was still something maybe in the pipeline, but then it morphed into what we have now, which is an advanced jurisprudence course. So the idea was that you cover what you've covered, or you refresh your knowledge of fiqh, which you've done in madrasa already, so you refresh that knowledge, and then you have more. And the idea of my lesson was to provide 3 things for the students. One was a history of the Hanafi madhab, which is beyond just the biography of the imams. So instead of just Imam Hanifa, Imam Muhammad Hassan Shaybani, Imam Yusuf, it was beyond that. So how fiqh was like from before Imam Hanifa, the idea of Kufa, how that played a role into the development of the madhab, and then moving down for the first 300-400 years. The second aspect that we were focusing upon was Dalal al-Madhab. The idea here is that there's multiple benefits to this. The the most clear benefit is that you learn the dalils of your madhab. So it builds a confidence in your madhab. So the idea was that we get 20 to 30, if not more, controversial issues. Not necessarily controversial in contemporary times, because there's masail that are not controversial now but were controversies before. So it's about looking at those classical issues which the Hanafi madhab was attacked for, and to see responses and how the Hanafi madhab responded to that. But the benefit, meaning it could be an easy task for me, which was I could just get one contemporary book of Hanafi dalils and do that. But the idea was that we use multiple texts. So we start from books from right from the beginning. So Imam Muhammad Hassan Shaybani's Al-Hujjah Al-Madina, and come all the way down to books I'la Sunan. So the idea is that the student at the end of the course, not only do they have these arguments or confidence in the madhab, but they also have access or exposure to multiple texts. So if in the future something like this comes up, they know where to go. So multiple texts were consulted for that. And the third aspect that we were going to cover was contemporary fiqh. So the difference here with the Iftar course was that in the Iftar course the students are given questions. So you're given questions, you're supposed to go ahead and then find the answer, do the research yourself. But here it's me or the book we're looking at providing the answers. So it's looking at, this is contemporary issues and these are the answers given. And within that, meaning between the idea of dalal al-madhab and contemporary fiqh, where there was highly controversial issues, which maybe a simple fatwa doesn't solve. So when we looked at different books on those topics, so like something like photography, we looked at specific books or lengthy articles for pro and against. So because the students we're talking about, these are alim and alimas. So it's being exposed to arguments for what you believe in and against what you believe in. So it's the whole idea of exposure mainly. So that's the three things that I was covering in our lesson, and the other was Lubab, 2 lessons, and one was on Usul al-Fiqh that Mufti already spoke about, Masar al-Usul, and that's the whole structure of the advanced jurisprudence program. So the underlying goal of my aim for what I was trying to get at is that things like history, things like Dalal al-Madhab, contemporary fiqh, or these kind of topics, they can't be taught in a simple book or in terms of being dictated. So you can't just sit there and open a book up from the beginning to the end and you learn history, right? Or these are controversial issues, here's one book which covers everything. It doesn't work like that, nor does real life work like that. So it's about giving the students the ability to research. And the biggest struggle that a student finds when they graduate from madrasas is that jump into either a university or an Iftar, because the roles change. Because for 6 to 7 years, to become the top student in a madrasa is whoever could best, it's a bad word, but regurgitate what's been said in class. So however good you can copy or memorize what's been said in class and repeat it in exam, you're a top student. Straight when you get to Iftar or you go into a university, the burden is upon yourself now. You're supposed to be doing the reading, you're supposed to be providing the research. So the advanced jurisprudence course that we've presented, it merges that two together. So not only are you're still getting your lubab, so you're getting your classical training of how you do madrasa, but with that you're getting exposure. So part of what I would do was not just teach, but it was giving reading. So every week reading was given, books were given. So some books were 300-400 page long. So you're not expected to read the whole thing, but you do introduction to it, you read a conclusion, read a chapter. So then in the future, let's say 10, 15, 20 years down the line, something comes up and you say, oh, I remember there's a book there. Right? So that's the whole idea of it. In terms of how the students reacted, then in terms of research, there's 3 points I was just jotting down right now. What's needed to be able to do research? One is there's a basic competency. Meaning I can't carry out research in the field of physics because I don't have the basic competency for that. So there has to be some basic knowledge prior before you want to carry out some sort of research. Second is to have knowledge of previous research. So what's been already done beforehand, which you can call a literature review, because you don't want to take up a task when it's already been done beforehand. You will refer to the previous literature. And thirdly, because once you do literature review, there's research rate on every topic, right? But then you have to have knowledge of authority to know who are the authorities in the field and who are not. So if you hear someone's name saying they've done a research on this topic, you should have knowledge of what ranking they are and are they competent or not to do that, and authority and books, obviously, right? So you have books. So I found that the students that had, most of them had the basic competency, they did really flourish throughout. So the way I examined them was not a simple exam, it was a coursework. So they had an assignment to do half year, which was a review. So again, it's in the mixture. So you're given something, but then you have to provide your own insights on an article. You were given a choice between an Arabic or English article, academic pieces, and then in the end of year was an original piece that you're supposed to write. And so from what I've seen so far, it does seem that the students did very much enjoying it. Obviously they're the best people to ask for this, but they did seem to engage, and you can see from the beginning of the year to this year, the questions they're asking, because the best way you know how a student's doing is the questions they ask, and secondly the works that they're referring to with their writing. So in essence, I would say that from what we set out to do, again, the best people to ask with the students to see if they succeeded, but from what I've experienced from the students, I would say that it was a healthy environment and an environment for development and progress.
Another thing about the jurisprudence class is that we actually had 2 students who had not finished. They weren't graduates yet. One was actually only in the 3rd year, and the other one was in the 5th year, I think. 5th year? Basically the penultimate year, the Mishkat year, let's call it that, right? So one student was in the Mishkat year and the other student was only in the 3rd year, but they took the whole jurisprudence course and they didn't lag behind. They got good marks. And the benefit of that particular, for at least one student I know, is that it gave them it was like a rocket boost for fiqh. Because the fiqh you'll do here, while it's targeted at anybody, primarily postgraduates, but any smart student who really wants to study. So if you're doing alim course in the evening, for example, or even in the morning. So if you're doing it in the evening, then you can actually join this live in the daytime, because it's 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. And even if you're doing your alim course in the daytime, but you've got time in the evening and you really want to boost your fiqh, because believe me, fiqh is one of the most, especially if you've got an idea to be a mufti in the future, then this will really give you that boost. So aside from the Iftar course, all the other courses are not restricted just to ulama. They're restricted to anybody who will be able to deal with the issue and wants to enhance themselves. So even if you're doing it in the morning and you can't attend live, we had numerous students that were listening to the recordings because they were in another country. Although mashallah, we had one student, Allah reward him, he's from New York, and he used to be pretty much regular for most of the days from 8:30 in the morning, which is about 3:30 or 4:30 depending on timing, depending on the time of the year. So he was always there at 4:30 or 3:30, whatever it was, before he goes to work, doing this 4 hours of jurisprudence before he goes to work. So if it can be done for him, then those of you who are just teaching maktab, right? Actually, that's another dichotomy here. A lot of people, the excuse they make is that they can't take it because in the daytime they're working, and in the evening they're doing maktab. Now, to be honest, I mean, inshallah, you'll be teaching maktab, and may Allah accept your teaching. But if you have to take time off to enhance yourself and to equip yourself and take a year off your maktab, right, then I don't think that's a very bad idea at all. Because I think while it may be that this just seems like a new tradition, that once you're farig, our tradition has been, not tradition that's been laid down by the forebearers, they've always encouraged, because if you go to Darul Uloom Deoband, there are numerous takmeel programs, they call them. Same thing, what we have here, postgraduate program, they call them takmeelat programs, completion programs, enhancement programs. They have numerous ones. It's just that in Darul Uloom Deoband you have to have done the Dora there. So even if you're farig somewhere else, you'll have to go and do Dora there, the whole Bukhari again, and then you'll be able to attend them, right? If you want to be officially in attendance. So that's why don't feel that this is just for ulama or whatever. It can be done online. And mashallah, there were a number of students who actually used to listen online. There were mothers, alimas, who had children teaching as well, and they were, of course, they have to try to play catch up all the time. And mashallah, I think the jurisprudence, the good thing about the jurisprudence program, right, because you used to provide them so much additional reading material and give them exposure to so many different books, I think the forum, the Google forum, was really, really lively on that one, right? So even those who've probably never set foot in the UK, or maybe even in or in this place, or even in the UK for that matter, from other countries, they felt like they were probably in class because of the interaction that was going on. So now we'll move on to speaking about the tafseer course, which we're launching next year. So let's start talking about the tafseer course that we have proposed. This one is going to be over 2 days. It's going to be a Thursday, Friday program, right? Thursday, Friday program, about 8 to 9 hours over those 2 days. So one day will be 3 to 4 hours. The other day is going to be 3 hours. And what we're going to cover in this, I have not seen another tafsir course out there, and it's actually something that is a lot in demand, because tafsir is something that is just so mainstream. It's something that everybody can have access to, and it's something that everybody should have access to. When we say tafsir course, I don't want to reduce this to just talking about tafasir. It's actually a Quran and tafsir course. So it's related to everything about the Quran, both understanding the meaning of the Quran and the tafsir. The tafsir is essentially just a utility and a tool to understand the Quran. So there's numerous other subjects related to the Quran that we're going to try to deal with. So again, the proposal here is to spend about 2 hours a week out of those 2 days dealing with probably between, I would say, maybe 20 to 30 tafsirs we aim to cover during the year. So we're going to start from the earliest tafsirs. First, study the manhaj. There's numerous books that have been written on the methodologies and the style and their focus of the various different mufassirin, all the way starting from, if you start Ibn Abbas or go down to the first compiled one is probably the one that's published, everybody has, is Tabari. And you go down Ibn Kathir, and you have Alusi, and you have Qurtubi, and you have Tafsir al-Khazin, and you have numerous ones, and then you've got the modern ones. So the whole idea is to first study what's the unique features and the style of this mufassir, and then after that to take selected passages of that tafsir, because you're not going to be able to do the whole tafsir, but to take a surah or a cluster of verses and then actually read that tafsir and then look at his style. So for example, if it's Tafsir al-Razi, then we're probably going to take a selection on Aqidah, on theology, because that's what he's really good at, right? Qurtubi, mashallah, we'll have to see what a representative sample of that is, because he sometimes under just one or two verses, he'll have about 20 different abhath on various different subjects, and then Alusi and so on. So that's going to be kind of very interesting, because you'll get a good coverage and a scope and a review of at least the main tafsirs and some of the more obscure tafsirs, so that in the future when you want to study a verse, or you want to teach a lesson on tafsir, or give a dars of Quran in the masjid, you know exactly which tafsir to go to, because you would have dealt with them. You'd never think that, hey, these tafsirs, man, they're beyond me. So it's just trying to equip us to get into reading various different tafasir. The second, another hour will be a critical assessment of modern tafasir, because to be honest, there's been what people would say inhiraf fit tafasir in contemporary times. In the most recent times, there's been a lot of inhiraf in tafsir. So a lot of the modern tafsirs, they're not based on the classical literature. These were a lot of more tadabbur al-Quran, just contemporary understanding. In fact, what one assessment shows is that a number of the tafsirs that have been written recently, they were not necessarily even written by scholars, people who had a background in hadith and aqidah, and these were people who were good thinkers, good Arabists, right? Adibs, maybe, literature scholars, right? Thinkers, philosophers even. And then because the Quran is open to all, they produce the tafsir. Some have probably produced some really, some good points in there. But then this is also because it's not necessarily backed by full aqidah understanding or academic understanding of aqidah and hadith and so on. Sometimes, they could fall into what you would call deviation from the manhaj that has been understood. So a critical assessment of modern tafsirs. Then the next, another topic that's going to be covered in there is the whole concept of balagha and i'jazul Quran and fahmul Quran. So i'jazul Quran, the style, language and structure of the Quran. That's an amazing, I mean, I remember when I did that at SOAS with Professor Abdul Halim, that was just amazing. It just gives you this new dimension to look at the Quran from. It's quite amazing. Then there's the Western criticism of the Quran. You know, from over 100, 200 years ago until contemporary times. You know, numerous Orientalists have criticized the Quran on or various different themes in the Quran, various different ways. So it's trying to understand what they've written and how do we respond to that. Because if you're a scholar, you're going to receive questions about various different criticism, because these criticisms, when they come out, then they proliferate and people pick them up. And even if you think that they've all been dealt with, they are unearthed somewhere and they'll come back to haunt you. Right? So, Fahmul Quran, Western criticism of the Quran, responses to that, language, style and structure, i'jaz, balagha, critical assessment of modern tafsir and tafsir selections itself, and ulumul Quran. So ulumul Quran will be studied from various different books. And again, we're not going to study just one book. The idea is that Maulana Zishan, he will be providing various different I'm going to let him speak a bit more about that anyway.
Right, so the only thing that's left is Ulum al-Quran. Just a brief point before, because some people were calling this course, we didn't say, but they're saying a takhassus fi tafseer, meaning a takhassus requires a student to actually have studied the topic at a reasonable level and then do takhassus. So we're going to be starting right from the beginning and going quite deep, because in madrasa, most madrasas, there'll be exemptions, I'm sure there are in certain madrasas, but the level that's normally studied at is in Ulum al-Quran. If you're lucky, you may get a Fawzu Kabir. In terms of tafsir, if anything, you have Quran translation and then you have Jalalain. And Jalalain is, it's like an Arabic translation in Arabic. So you want to have much in terms of tafsir. So beyond that, to say I'm moving on to a takhassus, it wouldn't really make sense, right? So that's an important clarification. But that being said, Ulum al-Quran, the idea is we're still developing the course as it goes on. So we will see how this course goes, and then we will make amendments depending on, because it's not been done before, so we don't have a blueprint that we're following. So the idea of Ulum al-Quran is to have one base text, which is quite inclusive. It covers the main topics, and then in certain chapters to deviate away from the text and to go into maybe more classical works. So for example, the base text that we have right now we're looking at is Sheikh Abdullah Judayd's Al-Muqaddimat Al-Asasiyya fi Ulum al-Quran, which is a large book. It's about 500-600 pages, but it's quite basic in terms of its Arabic, its structure, and the way it discusses things is quite in a quite simplistic way. So the idea would be read that as a base text, but then as chapters come, so you do Nasikh Mansukh, or you're doing Ahruf, for example, you're discussing Ahruf, you can move into Al-Itqan, so the discussion of Suyuti, because Itqan Suyuti has multiple views. But then when you're doing Itqan of Suyuti, let's say on the issue of Ahruf, there's so much written in there, it's difficult to try to even work out what's correct, what isn't, because he literally does jump of everything. So then the idea is that the teacher is teaching the book, and the students as well, because the idea of how I structure my lessons here, because it's advanced, it's not me seen as a teacher coming here and telling you what's right or wrong or dictating to you. It's because everyone's qualified. It's for us to sit together and then go through text together. So everyone has an input, an idea, and I have my views, an idea, and then we try to develop our views together rather than me being an expert and coming and telling you what's what. So that's the basic idea of Ulum al-Quran. Then from there, certain topics are going to be taken out. So one of the Mufti said was response to the Mustashriqun. Now, one of the major critiques of the Quran by the Orientalists is on the origins, right? So Mufti mentioned before on the idea of Sahih Bukhari. So people are questioning Bukhari, we're not talking about questioning of Bukhari to the Prophet ﷺ. The questioning is of us to Imam Bukhari, right? And where does this questioning come from? Is the idea of oral transmission and manuscripts, nuskhas, right? Having a manuscript of sources and how knowledge is transmitted. It's such an important part of our knowledge, and such an important aspect of knowledge it is, which we don't have a separate lesson for, right? That we learn this. So the whole idea is to pick out those topics which are not covered, and then we try our best here to try to cover that and provide sources for students to read and to take on for later. So that's the basic idea.
So if we move over, inshallah, to our theology program, I think we had about just less than 30 students, 27 or something students in that. Again, there were probably less that used to come on site than those who used to, mashallah, very diligently. There's a number of students who were on track that listened to the entire program over the course of the 8 or 9 months that we were doing it. Now the theology program was split into two, which we detailed last year. It's actually two aspects to it. So half of it, the full theology program, which was 9 hours. This year it's going to be 2.5 times 3, which means 7.5 hours approximately. Last year it was actually 369 hours. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday evenings. So what we had in here is that half of it dealt with the classical sources. So we took two texts. One was Sharh al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyya of Maydani, and alhamdulillah that was covered. So you got the Maturidi understanding. Then we took the Sharh al-Kharida al-Bahiyya, and that was quite an interesting text because initially it starts off as being very terse, very refined, very particular, and the Arabic is very challenging. And then after that it becomes very, very easy after about 20% of the book. But it gives you an understanding of the Ash'ari side of things. When you have the two together, it complements each other because the order is not the same. So when you've studied the sifat in here, then you get to refine them in the other text. And then another discussion would come before in the other text, and you then take it in the Kharida. Then after that, once the Sharh al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyya of Maydani was completed, then we started looking at Qunawi's commentary. So we did several selections of that. We weren't able to cover the whole commentary because that wasn't intended either. So that was the Arabic part of it. The other aspect of it is where primarily Ustad Imran and Dr. Safaruk, they dealt with that. And I'm going to leave it to Ustad Imran to explain what we did last year in overall, and how we're going to maybe adjust that for next year. But that was a very, very ambitious program. And the reason for it is that we covered several different things in there, starting from, you could say, Plato and Aristotle, because we live in the West, much of the Western philosophy, Western understanding of the world, about life, about the brain, about the heart. I don't think that's a big discussion on the heart, but about the hereafter, whether there is a hereafter. A lot of that comes primarily through Aristotle and Plato, and it goes down, it filters, changes, adjusts, gets replaced, gets critiqued. So the major thinkers that we dealt with, what this course gave me, because I was listening, when I wasn't teaching the other part of it, I was listening. One of the greatest benefits of this is that you then begin to understand what feminism is actually all about. Where does the whole issue about religion and science, where does it converge and where does it go wrong? Right? Where does, for example, a lot of what you read in the media, and a lot of the onslaught against Islam, a lot of the postmodernist ideas, right, that are basically founded in existentialism and hermeneutics, the way they look at texts and so on. It just gives you an understanding. For any alim, really, this understanding is so important, because this is the kind of thought process, the mentality, the ideas that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and we just get caught up in that, and we don't know how to respond because we don't know where it's coming from, on what foundations is it based. When you understand, you can immediately tell that, okay, this is coming from an empirical perspective, this is coming from an existential issue. Now, that was, mashallah, diligently taught, and the amount of hours and subjects that were covered in there. One of our supporters, right, where I mentioned him earlier, who actually took the course as well, is Prince Ghazi, who is a philosopher in his own right, because he studied all of Plato's books. He's actually got 2 PhDs on philosophy subjects. He took the whole course, and I was surprised that he was always on time. He didn't lag behind too much. Within 2 weeks, he would have, he would never have more than probably 2 or 3 lessons outstanding. He was on the ball. And we wanted to change the course slightly. He says, no, you're not going to change the course. This is probably the most unique course that you have. And it basically is so unique. He reckons that nobody else, no other university, forget Islamic university, non-Muslim university is not even providing the scope that we're providing. Because we're dealing with lots of stuff in there, right? Evolution, gender fluidity, artificial intelligence. There's just so much that's been dealt with in there that it's quite unique. So if somebody really wants to understand, and I think anybody who's really wants to become aware of how to deal with a lot of the common questions and contemporary challenges, this course is very, very important. It can sound a bit daunting. Some aspects of it are daunting, but look, if you don't understand the whole thing, that's fine, right? At least you can take back a lot and get an understanding of where things are coming from. So I'm going to let Ustad Imran, unfortunately Dr. Safaruk was supposed to be here. He was unable to come today. He had to pull out the last yesterday. But Ustad Imran, he'll do his part. And again, if you have any questions about these things, we're going to take them later.
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Just to elaborate and add to what Mufti Sahib said, in terms of the course structure, we had innumerable aims and objectives and sections to do, and alhamdulillah we managed to do a lot of them, but we weren't able to do many of them simply due to the fact that we ran out of time in some areas. But because we covered the topics in a lot of detail, it just time ran out as such. But I try to enumerate in terms of what we actually did and in terms of what topics inshallah we're going to carry on with. So areas that we explored were arguments for God. So we looked at the cosmological argument, the ontological argument, the design argument. We looked at the whole notion of the concept of God. So what does it mean, the word God? What is the concept behind that? How do we equate or how do we resolve the issue of omnipotence, God's power, with reference to, for example, paradoxes? Can God create a stone that he cannot lift himself? You've heard of that paradox, haven't you? Or for example, how do we reconcile the issue of God's ilm, God's knowledge, with the issue of free will, and so on and so forth. So we looked at the arguments for God's existence, we looked at arguments against God's existence. So atheists have arguments against God's existence. They give arguments like arguments such as divine hiddenness. If there is God and God is all loving, how come most people don't recognize God or they can't find God? Why is God hidden in such a way? If there is God and he is all powerful and all loving, then why is there evil in the universe as such? Right? Why is there so much evil, and so on and so forth? So we looked at arguments for, we looked at arguments against, and the benefit of looking at those particular areas and those themes was primarily it fed into Mufti Saab's theology section, because in the theology text that you look at arguments for God's existence, you look at God's attributes and sifat, and we looked at this in terms of a broader sense from from a philosophical perspective. So much of those discussions about God's existence, the concept, the attributes, a lot of this stuff, if you go to university, it'll be a full module in terms of a BA or an MA course, but we started with that in order to provide a foundation for Mufti Saab's course. And then subsequently after that we went to other areas related to science and religion. We looked at the whole issue of philosophy of science, what is science. We looked at the whole issue of methodology of science, induction, deduction. We looked at all these kind of paradoxes. Then we looked at in terms of case studies, okay, so what's the reconciliation of religion and science? What are the different paradigms? I know everyone's probably heard of Richard Dawkins in this room and at home, and we know Richard Dawkins is a very famous proponent of the position that science and religion are in conflict. They call it the warfare paradigm, but there are other paradigms as well. So if you look at al-Mutakallimin, they had an integrationist paradigm with science and religion. So we explored different paradigms in terms of science and how we can understand science and religion. We looked at case studies, we looked at evolution in a lot of detail. SubhanAllah, we had about at least 9 hours on just evolution in terms of exploring what evolution was, intelligent design, looking at it from the issue of problems within the evidences. So we had 2 guest speakers with regards to this. You had Mulana Uthman Ali, who basically is doing loads of YouTube videos. You put him in YouTube. He actually did about 6 hours, and then we had Mufti Abdur-Rahman, who came in and did a whole theological rejoinder. So we put a lot of emphasis in terms of those areas. We looked at quantum mechanics, and then after that we looked at some areas which you don't necessarily really explore much at university, areas of sociology. So how does sociology and religion interact? How does psychology and religion interact? So everyone's probably heard of Freud, and everyone's probably heard of some of his psychological or psychoanalysis theory, but it has a massive bearing on religion. People don't appreciate that much of the modern realm is based upon Freud's understanding of religion as being a trauma, yeah, as being a suffering that human beings go through, like a neurosis or an illusion. We looked at the whole issue of politics as well. We looked at Karl Marx. We looked at the issue of ethics, so the utilitarian principles and so on and so forth. So I know I'm chucking a lot of key words here to you, but we actually went through it very systematically over a period of at least 30 odd weeks. Alhamdulillah, we broke it down to different modules. So what we've done this year, inshallah, we're hoping to modularize everything in a more succinct way, so that it provides people the opportunity to come in and do different types of modules, like God's existence, God's concept, science of religion, the issue of sociology and psychology. So as Mufti Sahib said, what's the point of this? One is that we all have shubuhat at the end of the day. I know many people here are ulama, have advanced degrees in Islamic studies, but there are always going to be doubts at the end of the day, and this is part of iman anyway, to have doubts. So it's for personal satisfaction in terms of being able to provide a rational answer to yourself to the best that you can do. And we know in our tradition not all answers are rational. Sometimes we leave it to the realms of the gap where we don't know, but not all questions are left to the gap. So God's existence is not a question that is said, well, alhamdulillah, we leave it to Allah. I believe in Allah because Allah said so. Is this how our scholars argued this? Fine, maybe some questions about God's attributes are questions off the gap, but there are many questions that we can give evidence for. So one is personal satisfaction of the beliefs that we hold. And actually I forgot to mention, we actually had this whole section on Islam as well, in terms of looking at miracles. What is the miracle of Islam? Why is Islam true and not Christianity or, for example, Judaism? And Ustaz Safruq, who's an expert in terms of Arabic balagha, he went into the whole issue of the Arabic language, looked into the issue of the Quranic miracle, the linguistic miracle that aspect. I think Mufti Sahib said you are going to touch on the tafseer course. That's something that's not discussed very often. You get discussions of Quran and science, Quran and in terms of prophecies, but very rarely do you get the Quranic miracle as Allah has articulated himself, which is the linguistic miracle. Allah has challenged, hasn't he? And we talked about that as well in terms of those miracle aspects. So personal satisfaction is one issue, but then obviously as ulama, as muftis and so on and so forth, people come. Obviously, people are in charge of flocks and communities, and there are people who are going to come and they want solutions and answers. And if they can't find solution and answer from the ulama, then end of the day, it somehow brings shubuhat into them in terms of the whole religion. Because an alim and a mufti is a representation of the religion. That's what he is or she is. And if they can't provide a cogent answer, then that somehow, and this is incorrect, it's fallacious reasoning, but it somehow, for that individual who's asked that question and not got the answer, it really breaks down that religion. You think to yourself, this religion has no answers if this is what these people have. So it's to provide our community who are suffering now. So many people out there have so many shubuhat. They have so many doubts. There's so many issues. Only yesterday I was watching a video about transgenderism and so on and so forth. How do we deal with that in terms of Islam? Gender fluidity. Most schools are now going to be having unisex toilets. What's the Islamic perspective on that? How do you give a rational answer rather than saying, blasphemy, Allahu Akbar, or something, silly that is equated to Islam? How do we give a rational, cogent answer which Islam gives? So, alhamdulillah, those are kind of areas we discuss. Some of the vernacular, the terminology can be difficult, but alhamdulillah, this is something that we're going to be working on this year to make sure that we start at a very basic level, build you up. We have Google Classroom as well in terms of the FFC program. We had loads of stuff on that. Ustaz Safruq was answering loads of questions. So we have a lot of interaction as well in terms of those issues. So you're not basically coming to lectures and you're left to your own devices. There's a lot of interaction in terms of if you want to know answers, you want to explore things further, there's a lot of resources we provide. So we did it last year. It went okay, I would say. We're trying to optimize it, inshallah, make it better. But as Mufti Sahib says, it's a very useful course in those issues in terms of personal as well as dawah purposes, in terms of positive dawah, where we can positively go out and give dawah, and negative dawah in terms of negating those things about the religion of Islam, those kind of controversial things, those kind of taboo things that are necessarily, not always dealt with, or just, bulja, yeah, later. And that's sometimes the elders are right. Leave it sometimes, yeah. But not everything can be left sometimes. There are many things that shouldn't be left, and if they're left, then they cause major doubts. So I'll pass it back to Mufti Sahib, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair for that. So the half which is related to more the philosophical aspects, and not the classical Arabic text, but what Ustad Imran's on, that was also, you could just take that separately, which is called a faith foundation. That's what it was called, a faith foundations course. And again, we're going to make it into modules. So if you can't take the whole course for the whole year, you could take one module, the science module or the the theology module, or it'll be on the site very soon if you don't want to take the whole course. I just want to mention, what Ustad Imran mentioned. He mentioned a number of names, whether that be Karl Marx, Popper, Freud, Kant, right? These are the Western prophets, basically. Europe hasn't had a prophet, right? I don't think there's any prophet. There's no prophet that was sent to Europe. God knows best, Allah knows best, really, but there's no history of that. So they've imported Jesus, peace be upon him, and then there's the Judeo, and then there's the Muslims who've come in. But in terms of the so-called modern prophets, right, in that sense, then you've got these famous thinkers. Now, the average person on the street, or the person who's writing the article, or the person who's giving the interview, who's critiquing Islam or trying to push a certain agenda or a certain idea of feminism or whatever, they're never going to say that this is a feminist idea, or that this is empiricism, or this is science. Well, science they may use, or they may never call it hermeneutics or whatever. They may never even have to quote Freud or Kant or Marx or anybody else, if it's an issue of sociology. They will just provide the idea. It's actually it's ingrained, right? It's like the way Muslims will speak about Islamic issues without necessarily quoting, because it's so common. It's become common nomenclature, right? It's become common terminology, common ideas. So they won't even know that this actually comes from Freud, or that this comes from Kant, or this is an idea that's based in existentialism, or whatever the case is. But this is what the Western idea is based on. And if we don't know what it's based on, then it's very difficult to try to attack it, because what we're doing here in this course is you take the idea and then we show the criticisms against it, both from a Western perspective and from an Islamic perspective. And that's very interesting. All of these ideas, they've actually been critiqued by Westerners themselves, right? Other scientists, other thinkers. So we're showing how they're critiqued, and then we can say, okay, this is maybe the Muslim way, the Islamic way of looking at it. So don't get put off by the big names and the big ideas and all that, because we have to understand them and then be able to, inshallah, deal with what's going on outside. I want to move on to the last course. Now, this last course has come from our experience over the last year with the other courses. And what this was is that, remember, this was primarily supposed to be a postgraduate institute, right? Which means that you would have studied your alim or alima course, and now you're going to come and further yourself in one of these areas. So if you felt a bit weak in jurisprudence, you'll do that. Theology, you'll do that, right? And you'll do more. You weren't expected to know all of these theology things in a madrasa. A madrasa can never cover all of these things. They can cover some of these things, right? But they can't cover all of these things. That's just impossible, right? What we discovered is that we've had a number of students, a few, who were unable to get a grasp of the text. Because, mashallah, we had some students who'd studied and graduated maybe 10 years ago, right? 8 years ago, maybe even more, right? Because we don't know all of them when they graduated. But they've become very rusty, right? So, Arabic, the Lubab, for example, the Usul al-Fiqh book, it was quite a challenge. Because when you've been, especially a language, when you've neglected a language for a while, you're going to become rusty in a language. A lot of people have done Spanish at school or French at school, and you tell them to speak French right now, and they probably can't, right? Even if they got an A in their GCSEs, for that matter. So the same thing happens. If you don't use a language, then you're going to lose it. So we found that these students were finding it really tough to understand the language of the book. And some of them may have been more recent graduates, but maybe weren't able to work hard enough, or whatever the case was. So now we've launched another course, which is called the Sibawayh course. Now, Sibawayh is obviously the famous Nahwi, the grammarian, right? So don't get put off by the name, it's just a nice name. But really what it is, it's an Arabic refresher course. What we mean is, we're not going to take you back to Nahwu Mir or Mu'allim al-Sarf and get you to memorize all the gardans, right? That's not the idea of the course, right? The idea is that it's going to start off with a kind of an overview of the main rules of Nahw and Sarf, which you need on a practical level to deal with texts. Right? So think that's sabak stuff. Right? We only want to do that for a few weeks at the beginning just to get people into it, and those who know that very well, they can proceed on to the text. Then we're going to start with a series of texts. This is only about 6 to 7 hours a week. Most likely it's going to be on a Saturday or a Sunday. We're still trying to decide because there's different people who want to do it at different times. I don't think we're going to be able to do this in the weekdays anymore because we don't have space here. We've got several courses running at the same time, so we're not going to have space. Most likely this is going to be a weekend course, right? So either a Saturday morning to early afternoon or Sunday morning to early afternoon. The idea of this is that you'll get your overview of Nahw and Sarf. Then we're going to put you onto the text, starting with things like Nafhatul Arab and going on to Mukhtarat and other texts. We'll take selections of fiqh texts, usul texts, hadith texts eventually, so that you build up slowly. A lot of the work you're going to have to do in terms of really you're going to be given work, to work out for the whole week, use a dictionary, told how to use a dictionary, a lexicon. And I've been compiling, because I've been teaching for the last 2 years, last several years, but I've been compiling a list of what I think are the most common pitfalls in translating from Arabic into English. The reason is that Arabic is a totally different language. Forget the fact that it's written right to left and English is written left to right. That's a minimal problem. The bigger problem is the idioms. And people will know that the min bayaniya doesn't exist in English. And so many people get lost in min bayaniya. But that's just the simplest issue, right? There are people who still translate the waw isti'nafiya. In English, there is no waw isti'nafiya. You don't have to start every sentence with a and, right? But yet, when a lot of people are translating, they're so literal, right? That every time it's wa anna Allah wa this wa that, that's supposed to be a silent waw, really. Because in English, it doesn't make sense at all to keep saying and. Your English teacher would probably cross that off. That why do you keep saying and for at the beginning of a fresh sentence? The waw in Arabic is just to show you that this is a new sentence. You don't have to translate it. Every time they come to a fa, they say so. And it doesn't work in English because sometimes the fa is used to represent something else. I don't want to bore you with all of the details, but I think after testing a number of students and listening to them, I think I figured out where a lot of the pitfalls are. So what we're trying to do is to get them to do a very refined translation. The reason is that in Arabic, if you've got the word kharraja and kharaja and istakhraja and akhraja, it's all about either exiting or taking someone out or evicting someone or wanting somebody to be evicted. But if it says istakhraja, then it means to want somebody to come out. And a lot of students don't appreciate the khawasul abwab, right, which are the special characteristics of the particular verb form. There's a reason why the author is going to say takharraja as opposed to kharaja, because takharraja, he's trying to come out. There's a pretense aspect there, or there's an effort, because bab tafa'ul is to show takalluf. And I think this is where a lot of students, what they do is they see it's kharaja, it means going out, so they just do a rough translation related to going out and they get by. And that's not right. Arabic is such a refined text that you almost feel like these people are doing a crime by not understanding the nuance of that particular aspect. So I think I've got about 10 to 15 particular pitfalls which inshallah we're going to try to go through and get people to master so that they avoid these things. And then inshallah you'll see that it'll be smooth sailing, right? We're going to try to get you to think in Arabic, because what's happening is that if you've studied in Urdu, then you will translate, you'll read the Arabic, people read ibarat, they read the text, they don't understand what they're reading. They read it first and hope they get it right. And if the Arabs are written there, then they'll probably get it right. And if it's written wrong, then they'll get it wrong. then what they'll do is they'll try to then translate it into Urdu in their mind. Then from Urdu they'll try to translate it into English. And I've seen students who have not studied Urdu, they've studied directly in English. They're just still reading the text first as though it's some kind of empty text. Then they're trying to make a sense of it. What we're trying to do through this course is to get you to read the text and think in Arabic, right? So as soon as you read it, you know what it's talking about. And you know if you don't know the meaning of something, so you'll go and check it up before you actually move on to the next part. Or you'll understand it from the context. So I think this is to empower a person to really get the Arabic, really understand it. Because without that, you're going to struggle in your hadith, you're going to struggle in your Aqidah books, you're going to struggle in all of it. There are just some common themes, right? For example, in Nurul Idha, right, there's a term I remember from when we read it in our first year, right? وَيَصِيرُ الْمَاءُ مُسْتَعْمَلًا بِمُجَرَّدِ إِنْفِصَالِهِ عَنِ الْجَسَدِ. This mujarrad word, I mean, if you look in the dictionary, it's like denuded, unclothed. What's that got to do with this here? But the word mujarrad means just merely, purely, from just. So that's an idiom of the Arabic language. And that's why I try to explain to people. We're just trying to convey the Arabic idioms. So for example, in English we say, have you tried it out? A person who's learning English afresh, he's going to look at tried it out. Okay, try means to attempt. Tried it out. Like get out. Exit. How does that make any sense? They're going to stumble over out. The reason why we have no problem with this is because this is how we think. So the idioms are part of our normal understanding of language, right? Because we've mastered. And when you can't do that to Arabic the way they speak, for example, أعجبك هذا? I remember when I was in Syria, in English we say, do you like this? Do you like this? Whereas in Arabic, they say, does that fascinate you? Right? Well, you could say, هل تحب ذلك? But generally they say, هل أعجبك? Right? Has that fascinated you? Like, do you like it? Right? As though that thing is doing all the work. Right? So that's just ways of understanding Arabic. And believe me, if you just understand these small issues, you'll be able to master the Arabic language. So that's what we're trying to focus on in this course. Inshallah, it's only about 6 hours a week, right? But inshallah, that will give you that confidence, and I hope, inshallah. So that's basically called a Sibawayh program, because inshallah after that, in a forthcoming year, we then intend, for those who really enjoy their Arabic, we intend to do an advanced selections of Arabic texts. So for example, we're going to deal with the Maqamat al-Hariri, the Sab'u al-Mu'allaqat, Diwan Hamasa, Diwan al-Mutanabbi, and Maqamat Hariri, and Mukhtarat, right? And really appreciate the literature, and really understand the Arabic and the nuances and why a certain word has been used in a particular place. For a jurist, that is so important, because the jurist, the faqih who's writing, the reason he's used and chosen a certain word has a number of benefits. That's why he's chosen that word and not something else. Because most of our books, they've been refined over the centuries. These are not like first drafts that have been written arbitrarily. They've actually been written and then probably refined so much that that's why you hardly see a mistake in them these days. Right? And then they've been commented on and so on and so forth. So anyway, I hope that gives you an understanding of what we're trying to achieve by this. But this will be very useful for those people who feel weak but want to work hard in trying to develop their Arabic language, because without a solid foundation in Arabic language, you'll struggle with all of the sources that are in Arabic. Alhamdulillah. So in order to finish off now, I just want to mention a final plea. Stop wasting your time on WhatsApp. Stop wasting your time on forums. These debates will continue, but you can't defend against these debates unless you equip yourself in a solid way, right? If you're just catching up on stuff where, okay, the new issue is this now, so I go and learn, I'm waiting for somebody to write a response, I'll learn about that. All you're going to be aware of is just basically one side of the story and the issues themselves. The way to really do this is to make firm your foundations. So go and take a course on jurisprudence, take a course on the theology, take a course on the Quran, so that you can access the main books themselves. For our sisters, right, we really need you, because we have, mashallah, alimas, and we've got so many alima courses, but after they graduate, this is as relevant to you, in fact, if not even more relevant, because to be honest, we just had recently our controversial questions course, which is actually part of the theology course, but we kept it separate. We had about 170 or so people sign up for that, and it was 369 times 2, 18 hours. So it's over 2 weeks, 6 days, 3 hours each day. We dealt, I think at the end we ended up dealing with about 50 or 60 questions, extremely controversial questions, and I think some of the most controversial and animating questions were about women, about the whole women, whether that relates to hadith or whatever it relates to. So for sisters, your work is cut out for you, for the alimas, because people expect you to give answers. And to be honest, in a number of these issues, if there's a man who's trying to tell the Islamic viewpoint on an issue dealing with women, it doesn't look good, right? Because they're saying you're just a guy, and then you got a beard as well, most likely, right? They say that you have absolutely no idea, right? It just doesn't go down well. We need women to deal with these women issues, because that will make a difference. Because as soon as a woman is dealing with it, immediately you can say, okay, this is not some man who hates women or who subdues women or subjugates women, oppresses women, because that's the charge that is out there. So we need the women to take these things by the neck and deal with them. That's a khidmah. It's not just a khidmah, it's a fard, it's a necessity. That you must deal with this. Allah's given you the knowledge for this reason, that you've spent 5, 6, 7 years, whatever you've spent. You need to continue to do that. Right? I know all courses are not the same. All alima courses, all alim courses, even all madrasas are not the same. They are of different degrees of intensity and focus. So regardless of where you studied, I'm sure there's a place for you, right? If you really want from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to open it up, inshallah, to questions. While you're formulating your questions, Arif Bhai is going to come and just read you a few testimonials.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, there's a number of testimonials that we have received, and these are mainly from the advanced jurisprudence course. And one, just to start off with, it says, mashallah, I can only describe the teachers as gems, as Mufti and a number of teachers that are involved in the course, mashallah, put a lot of effort into devising the course itself. Another testimony mentions that the institute is built around a developed level of study. And it mentions the style of teaching is very well adapted to the times we live in which it's essential for any British Muslim seeking out Islam. Another testimonial just to mention is that the instructors have clearly made a lot of effort in making the material relevant, teaching masail from a contemporary point of view where needed. Now some of these testimonials that I'm going to just point out a number of things, and there's a reason why I'm mentioning these aspects of the testimonials. Another testimonial mentions that the course is an excellent refresher for those that have graduated but have lost touch with their studies. And another one, despite being an online student, this is very important for those, there's a lot of benefit of being on site as well. But just as a testimonial for those who are online, it says that I have found that the course has helped me to make the jump from simply sufficing with the text I am studying to regularly referring to other texts and resources to verify my understanding and to gain more depth, both because of the teachers and other students. And regarding to the Faith Foundation course, it's mentioned that generally Whitethread has opened doors for those who wish to pursue further studies and are looking for guidance on how to make all that they have learned. Now the reason why I mention a lot of these aspects of the testimonials is you can see that from Whitethread Institute there's an effort to make the content relevant to today's time. There's a lot of studying that will be done in the previous study, hence the postgraduate is dealing with the issues of today. And I think Mufti and Ustad Imran and other teachers on the courses have really made the effort to kind of deal with the issues of today. And alhamdulillah, just as Mufti has mentioned, the number of courses that we have done in the past year, as well as the events that we have held, like Mufti Usmani coming, holding his dars here, and inshallah with many events to take place. You can see that in the short term, alhamdulillah, we have made the effort to make that step, but we're not short-sighted here. We have the long-term vision, the long-term view, that inshallah ta'ala we are able to provide more courses, but we are also able to provide good quality ulama into the community. And with that comes with the effort of your dua, your du'as, and the support that you give us and the push that you provide us. Without your effort, without your push, without your guidance, then we can't provide for the courses that we want. But on top of that, I have to deal with the most important aspect, which is dealing with the finances of running this institute. And alhamdulillah, we've done well for the first year, but like I mentioned, we're not short-sighted here. We're not in the short term. We're here for the long term. And inshallah ta'ala, we want to be in a position where we can kind of build from what we have today, and to be able to provide more courses, to be able to hold more events, in a larger space that we have than here. And with that, we have a paper where it's to set up direct debits. Now we're only asking for small contributions throughout the months, which will contribute throughout the year, which will be able to provide for the efforts that will go into providing the better qualities and the space that is available to us, inshallah ta'ala. Therefore, we're asking everyone who has the ability here to kind of donate as much as they can on a monthly basis. And we've also got a link online where people can go online to donate online as well, inshallah ta'ala.
So we're not doing a fundraiser. We don't want, of course you can give money if you want, but we're not asking you for money right now. The whole idea is that if you can sign one of these direct debit forms, because recently there was a property that became available. It was extremely expensive, and initially we even tried to go for it, but then we realized that it was over 2 million, right? And we thought, if we're going to start looking for that kind of money, then our courses are going to suffer. So then we pulled out. So now we're just trying to be a bit more proactive, that I hate to ask for money, right? But I'm not asking for myself. The idea of this is that those who have the ability, and I've seen that, with any kind of donation you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always repays you. That's like, you can swear by that, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the Quran himself. So even if it's £5 a month, you won't even see it disappear from your account. But it will have a huge, instead of, to be honest, you deposit the money in your bank, then from there it will go into a deposit with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's basically what you'll be doing. So for me, a donation is just a deposit with Allah. That's all you're doing, really, right? I went to a masjid the other day, on Friday, Hayes Masjid, and they've got these guys collecting money outside. I said, you're the bank. Basically, you're the bank of Allah, because your people are coming and depositing money for the sake of the hereafter. Anyway, I'll take the questions now. We've got for the theology course, is there a basic primer or text in English that you can recommend reading prior to the course, as some of the topics are subjects we've never studied or read about? There is some kind of philosophy 101 or something that you can suggest?
Inshallah, if there are, we can suggest a number of books. So there are really decent, A-level books that are already out there, which we can, provide PDFs for and even recommend. There are other interesting books in terms of Nigel Warburton has a book called A to Z of Philosophy. So there are books out there which you can touch. But what we do is this, in terms of the sessions, when we go into a topic, let's say cosmological argument, we touch it from the basics all the way to an advanced level, and then we give you all the literature as well. So yes, there will be things available, inshallah, in terms of pre-reading material and post-reading material, and even if you want advanced material, we will provide that as well, inshallah. It's all about interaction in terms of the pupils and students. The more they want to interact, the more we give them, inshallah. So yeah, we will provide some reading material in terms of on the website as as a preliminary kind of thing.
Somebody's in the 5th year of Alim course. Will the tafseer course benefit me? It will benefit you if you've got the time, right? It will benefit you. There's no doubt about that, because it's quite easy. It's not as challenging as the fiqh one, I think, because there's just a lot of things that you have to listen to and kind of interact with. I don't think it's as difficult as the fiqh course. Neither as difficult as the theology course. It will definitely benefit you. You just have to see whether how much time you've got. If you've got the time, come along. I think it will be of benefit, inshallah. The Sibawayh course is online, but the one difference with the Sibawayh course and the other courses is that the other ones you don't have to listen live. You could listen to the recordings later and then you could interact on the forum. But the Sibawayh one, you're going to have to be online, live, because the teacher is going to listen to you, read, and help you understand that. So you can't do that on a forum, right? You can't just listen to that. If you want to, you can, but you're not going to get the real benefit out of it that you should. Of course, you can sign up if that's your last resort and you've got no other option for it. But really, we'd like you to be live on this one. Of course, you can online email us courses at whitethreadinstitute.org from the website and so on. And now all the courses are open for you to sign up. I do want to mention that I know some of the courses may seem very expensive compared to what you may have even paid for your alim course, because alim courses are generally quite cheap in most madrasas. They've tried to keep because they subsidize it. But here we want to show that it's a commitment you have to make. But don't be daunted by the fact that if you can't pay. Even last year we tried to help out as many students as possible, and I don't think we returned anyway. We tried to find a way to accommodate anybody who's serious about their studies. We want good students. If you can't pay, we'll try to help you by getting the funding, inshallah, for that. So don't feel embarrassed to ask, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan, barakallahu feekum.